Welcome back to Wharf Wide Web. Today we'll be looking at just some of the cargoes that pass along the waterways here. You can't talk about the Bridgewater Canal without talking about coal. Before the canal, it had been noted that the coal at the Worsley pithead was about 10 pence per pack horse. But by the time that the poor horses had staggered into Manchester, that same coal could be sold for double or even treble, and the poor people couldn't get a look in against the manufacturers. But the canal slashed this by more than half, and the idiosyncratic Duke gave an order that his agents at all his depots, Prestonbrook included, that the poor who came to fill an apronful or a lone wheelbarrow were to be given priority over the merchants who came with drays and wagons. With coal flowing freely to power the machine of industry, other goods started to follow. Britain was regularly at war with France, meaning that coastal ships trying to get cloth from Lancashire down to London were at serious risk of becoming collateral damage, if the weather didn't get them first. The completion of the Grand Trunk and the rapid expansions that followed allowed goods from every corner of Britain to travel up and down the superhighway of its age at a fraction of the cost and danger. The potteries required vast amounts of coal to fuel their kilns and mills, alongside china, clay and flints, bones and pigments, as well as hazel and straw to pack the finished products ready to load back into the boats to go away again. Foundries needed ore, paper mills needed wood pulp, chemical works needed half the contents of the periodic table. China, clay and tin from Cornwall, roof slates and cobbles from Conway, cotton from Manchester, ironwork from the Midlands, brass from Bristol, limestone from Derby, it was all packed onto one or another boat and sent on its way. As the industries on the home front grew, so too did the ones overseas. Sugar, tea and vast quantities of alcohol came in by sea from foreign lands and off to the shops by canal. Raw cotton and silk arrived in the ports at bales, and after a trip by canal went back out in rolls of fine cloth. The ships couldn't leave without help from the canal either. Salt, mined from the Witches just a few miles away, was needed in mammoth quantities to preserve the food crews needed to survive the weeks and months away at sea. Gilbert's mine alone was sending about 12,000 tons of salt a year through Prestonbrook. That's around 600 boats, or 3,400 Tesco vans. As people followed all this industry into the towns and cities, boats followed close behind laden with food. Saturn here could be described as one of the first Uber Eats, as she would be loaded up with perishables and travel with haste to deliver to market. If you time-travelled to Manchester to do your shopping, almost everything would have come by boat and wouldn't have done that many miles to get to you either. Beer from Warrington, flour from the mill at Prestonbrook, jam from Liverpool, soap from Runcorn, cream, fruit and veg from the surrounding countryside. But it wasn't just inanimate objects that used the waterways to travel. Almost as soon as the canal was in water, the Duke of Bridgewater noticed that people were hitching left on his barges to get to and from market and pounced on the idea. His passenger boats worked very much like the later train services, with different class tickets and an on-board cafe run by the captain's wife. Said cafe became fancy enough to gain French approval, but seems to have lost its shine somewhere after a pair of passengers had an eating contest and got through 3 pints of tea, 3 pints of beer, 3 loaves, 20 Eccles cakes, 2 kilos of beef and a kilo of boiled cabbage. History doesn't relate us to the air quality of the cabin for the remainder of the trip after the meal was finished, but given there would have been at least 120 passengers stuffed on board, it probably wasn't that great to begin with. The passenger packets were unique to the Bridgewater Canal, however. Anyone wishing to take a trip by boat rode in the hold with the rest of the cargo, and, as we have seen with Christina Collins, there was no guarantee as to what kind of trip you would have. Pickford's did quite a lot of passenger work, despite the risks, and even got a contract with the government carrying soldiers. Thousands of soldiers were carried by Pickford's boats, as the army recognised that it was not only quicker, but marching 250 miles before getting on board a ship to Dublin tended to make your troops disinclined to follow orders. You would have thought that a convoy of boats full of soldiers headed to Liverpool would keep the boatmen in line, but in 1824 the entire government contract was threatened after a boatmen's riot over pay delayed the soldiers' departure from London. Greased palms finally saw the boats moving, to the horror of the strike organisers, who would later end up in prison for their part. Pickfords realised there was quite a lucrative market in emigration and were part of a package deal for Fitzhugh and Grimshaw of Liverpool. For the set price of about £3,000 in today's money, the budding emigrant could board a Pickford's boat somewhere in England, change to a ship in Liverpool, and be deposited in New York. Your money included your meals, but you had to bring your own bedding. It wasn't a great deal, but it wasn't the worst either. But poor families often still had to crowdfund to be able to afford the chance. The canal part of the journey was a mixed bag, with some people saying it was the worst part of the whole trip, but others saying it almost made them change their mind about leaving England. Tomorrow we'll continue looking at canal cargoes, but we'll be looking at some of the darker aspects of trade.
There's one for the outtakes.
I've lost me potato!
Oh no!